In your presence, Eternal One, source of strength for us, as you have been for our ancestors, we very humbly acknowledge you. What are we? What is our life that you have done such great kindness to us? Therefore, we place our appeals before you, so that you may forgive and absolve us all our faults and failings, that our faults never become barriers between us and you. It may be a desire to prepare our hearts to feel awe and love for you. May you listen to these words of ours. May you open our encumbered hearts to the mysteries of your Torah. May this, our study, be a source of pleasure before your throne of glory, like sweet incense. May you shower down upon us the light of our soul's source, and all the ways by which we define ourselves. May the sparks of your holy servants, through whom you have revealed these words to the world, shine. May their merit, their ancestors' merit, the merit of their Torah, their innocence and their holiness, stand for us so as to prevent us from stumbling when we study these words. In their merit, may our eyes be illumined by what we study, as in the saying of the sweet singer of Israel. Open my eyes that I may gaze into wonder of your Torah. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart be acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer. For it is the Eternal who grants wisdom. It is from his mouth that knowledge and understanding issue forth. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 Okay, good evening to everyone. Hope everybody that wants to be in is in. And we are on page 271. 271. At the top of the page. And the subject is the, to use the word that's on that top line, the tortuous relationship between Jacob and Esau. The Torah story is notoriously challenging. We have these two brothers, and the competition between them plays out in ways that don't seem to be very satisfying to us. Jacob doesn't come out looking so wonderful, and the Zohar has been dealing with this to a certain extent. The Zohar is convinced, and the Zohar is basing itself on long-standing Jewish tradition. Jacob is the good guy, Esau is the bad guy, and there's no two ways about it. So how do we deal with the way that Jacob ends up getting the blessing, which doesn't look so straightforward, and it doesn't comport with everything that we're saying Jacob represents? So the Zohar, as I said, has talked about this already, but now it digs in a little bit more deeply into this question, into this problem. And as it digs into it, it just creates bigger dimensions of the problem. But well, let's see what happens. So 271, the very top of the page. I'd like to ask somebody to read for us, please.
I'll read.
Thank you, Beryl.
Come and see. Jacob knew that Esau had to cling to that tortuous serpent. So in all his dealings, he conducted himself toward him like another tortuous serpent. Tortuously, cunningly, necessarily.
Torture, not torture.
This accords with Rabbi Shimon's comment on the verse, God created the great sea serpents, Jacob and Esau, and every living being that glides, other rungs between them. Indeed, Jacob became cunning toward that other serpent, and so it had to be.
Okay, so these statements set it up. If we go backwards from, or in the middle of the paragraph, we have a very challenging statement that in the creation story itself, we have the elaboration of everything that God created. So pretty close to the beginning of the story, right? Verse 21. This is in the fifth day. So we have the Almighty said, let the waters swarm with all kinds of swarmings of living beings, and in the sky, let the birds fly over the earth upon the face of the firmament. And then the Almighty created et hataninim hagedolim, the great serpents. Ve'et kol nefesh hachaya haromeset asher shatzu hamayim limineim, and all other living beings that were crawling around and that swarmed through the water among all their species, and all the birds with the winged birds according to their species. And God is very pleased. God sees that it's all good. So what should jump out, or what could jump out from us in reading this, is that besides the generalities, all the fish, all the birds, we have two beings who are singled out as being specially created, right? And those specially created beings are two huge serpents, taninim. That word appears later on, again, when Moses and Aaron appear before Pharaoh, and they use their staff, and it turns into a serpent, some kind of squiggly monster type, dragony type creature. So we don't know what these sea serpents really are. They are, in some sense, mythic beings singled out beyond all other fish and fowl, right? So if you look in the note, look at 98. Note 98, please.
God created the great sea serpents, Jacob and Esau. God created the great sea serpents, Rabbi Yochanan said. This is Leviathan, the elusive serpent. Leviathan, the twisting serpent. Here in the Zohar, Esau symbolizes the demonic primordial serpent, while Jacob symbolizes holy, tortuous rival.
Okay, so according to this way of reading it, and you have a verse in Isaiah which gives us these adjectives about the serpent, that they're devious, they're slanted, they're zigzagging. So the two leviathans become symbols. One is a good leviathan, and one is a bad leviathan. In other ways of looking at it, they are a pair, right? They are a couple. But here in this interpretation, one leviathan is all good and one leviathan is all bad. And now the Zohar identifies that the bad leviathan is Esau, and the leviathan, the serpent, the zigzaggy, elusive, slimy, tricky, evil serpent, that's Esau. But how is Jacob, who is locked in mortal combat with his brother, and how is good, which is locked in mortal combat with its brother, with its twin, evil? Evil is good's evil twin, right? How does good contend, wrestle with, fight against evil? So the Zohar says it has to fight with the same weapons that the evil fights with. It can't just be innocent and straightforward, because it'll get clobbered by the serpent. Serpent will not play by the rules. Serpent will not hesitate to hit below the belly, so to speak. So if you're going to be locked in that kind of conflict with the serpent, then you're going to have to fight dirty. And that's what the Zohar says. Jacob knew that Esau had to cling, had to cling to that tortuous serpent. So in all his dealings, he conducted himself also that way. Right. So it's necessarily, it's a necessity, even though it is an uncomfortable necessity. Jacob and Esau are here identified with the two serpents. And what is their origin? God. Right? So let's understand again that painful, challenging idea that the Zohar keeps throwing at us, which is that evil, like everything else, also comes from God. Right? And they are almost, not quite. They're joined at the hip, good and evil. They are twins. They are siblings. So this is the Zohar's theoretical idea that explains why Jacob had to act in ways that we don't like. And the Zohar says, you're right. They're not honorable and straightforward ways of justice. But what's at stake? This is because Jacob is not simply free to live his own life in purity and in integrity. Jacob has to fight against Esau. Esau doesn't disappear on his own. All right, any comments?
No.
Okay, we continue.
Therefore, every new moon, a single goat, luring him to his sight so that he will separate from the moon. Similarly, on Yom Kippur, offering that goat cunningly to prevail against him, rendering him harmless. As is written, the Haser, the goat, will bear upon itself all their iniquities. Esav, who is Seir, a hairy demon, as has been established, all cunningly, deceptively toward him. Why? Because it is written, with the crooked deal tortuously, for he is a wicked serpent, twisted spirit, perniciously cunning, accusing, and seducing above and below. So Israel anticipates and outsmarts him cunningly, tortuously, rendering him powerless.
Okay, thank you. So we have a couple of references here at the beginning of this paragraph that says that the story of Jacob and Esau actually doesn't stop with those two brothers, but it continues again and again and again, and it is embedded in our religious lives, and it is embedded in our calendar. This is a continual, systematic fight that has to be engaged in. So the first example is every month when we have the new moon, that's Rosh Chodesh, we have one goat that is a Rosh Chodesh sacrifice. If you look at note 100, please.
Every new moon, a single goat, luring him to his sight. According to Numbers 28:35, on each new moon, a goat must be brought as a sin offering. Here, this goat is intended to preoccupy Satan and lure him to the demonic realm so that he does not threaten Shekhinah, symbolized by the moon. The 16th century Kabbalists of Sefed observed the day preceding the new moon as Yom Kippur Katan, minor day of atonement.
Right, a small Yom Kippur. So when we read the Rosh Chodesh reading, it says you should give to God on your celebrations of the new moon. This is it from the Torah reading of Pinchas, next week's Torah reading. Uvrashecha Shechem. Craig, you want to say it by heart? I can't hear you, but
except I will not do it by heart, but I will read it.
All right, Bamidbar 20. Right. So the first part is that there are all these other animals that are offered as sacrifices, to celebrate Rosh Chodesh. And then the last line is that there's one goat that is offered as a sin offering to the eternal, right? And that's in addition to the regular sacrifice that is always given. So this one goat is called a sin offering. What's the sin offering? So here the Zohar explains that this is a decoy offering that is given to the Sitra Achra, given to the evil side, to the bad side, to Satan, to the the evil one, and is sort of throwing this. You throw the goat to Satan, so that Satan will devour the goat. And why is the goat so appealing to Satan? Because the goat is a sa'ir, and Satan is sa'ir, because Esav is sa'ir. Sa'ir means hairy, right? That's what we had when Esav is born. He comes out all hairy, right? Like a hairy cloak. So Se'ar is hair, right? So when the rock musical Hair came to Israel, they translated it Se'ar, right? Hair. So Sa'ir is both hair and also a goat, and it's also the region where Esav set up his own nation. So the goat in the language of the naming indicates that the Satan can't resist a good goat, right? This is like the special delicacy of the Satan. So you throw Satan a goat, Satan is uncontrollably munching on the sa'ir, on this goat, and therefore we can happily go celebrate with God without any interference, right? The evil inclination won't get in the way. We can be pure-hearted, and we can be totally devoted to God at that moment. Okay, this is one of the ways that the Zohar talks about what that sin offering is all about. We have other interpretations which get a little more tricky, but actually in a roundabout way they come back to a lot of what we're saying here tonight. Does anybody remember why is it called Chatat Lashem? Does anybody remember? It's called a sin offering for God. So the simplest understanding is we're offering this sacrifice for God, right? To worship God. But the problem is that now we're saying something very scary, which is that we're actually offering the sin offering not for God, but for Satan. Satan is where we want to deliver this offering. We want to get Satan to eat this korban. So it's not for God at all, is it? But it is. Does anybody remember?
Doesn't it have to do with God telling the moon to diminish herself? And so
Right.
God now has to repent for
Right.
that.
So God is, according to a different midrash, God is saying, I'm so sorry that I diminished the moon. The moon was supposed to be of equal radiance and of equal essential nature as the sun. And then I cut it down to size, so to speak. And I made the moon smaller and only reflective of the sun. It doesn't have its own light source, right? So that diminishing of the moon, God is apologizing for. Every time the new moon comes, this is the midrash, which says, so it was necessary, but I had to do it. But actually, that midrash is related to what we're talking about. Does anybody want to try to connect the dots? let me remind us to look at page 270, first paragraph on the page. When we have the image of Jacob squeezing, holding on to Esau's heel, right? What does it say there? Beryl, you're the reader for tonight.
Alternatively, his hand gripping Esau's heel, unable to escape him entirely. Rather, his hand gripping the moon whose light is concealed on account of Esau's heel. So he had to deal with him cunningly, to thrust him down, to cling to his sight.
Okay, so does this bring back some thinking here about what happened there? How the light concealed of the moon is back to the same myth about the moon should have been just as bright and shiny as the sun, but no. And in the end of days, the moon will be restored to become like the sun. That's why it's concealed. But right now it's diminished. Why is it diminished?
Because of Esau's heel.
Because of Esau's heel. Right? So it's not that God gets angry at the moon and therefore punishes the moon and then God regrets it. God has to deal with the moon because the moon has been taken possession of by Esau. So God has to react and respond to Esau's heel that has insinuated itself into the moon, right? And made the moon make demands that were beyond what the moon should have been doing. The moon all of a sudden is overtaken by a Yetzer Hara, by an evil inclination. The moon is being, tempted, seduced into a path that is not proper. That's Esau's work. That's Esau's heel. That's the Satan that has sort of snuck in that devious, tortuous way and gotten into the moon's psyche. And then God has to respond again by holding on to Esau's heel, by trying to control Esau's heel. So the same thing is applied here. Right? This sin offering for God is because in the end, of course, who made Esau? God. Right? So it goes a little bit around in a kind of a circle. So this is the example of the new moon. Right? Every month we play this game with Satan, and we trick Satan because we take advantage of Satan's own inability to control Satan's own inclination. Right? The appetites that Satan has, Satan cannot control. So therefore, we know exactly how to take advantage, how to manipulate him, and we throw him the sa'ir. We throw him the goat. Similarly, on Yom Kippur, right? So the same thing happens. We have the scapegoat, right? We have two identical goats. We have two animals, and they are se'irim. They are sa'irs, and one is brought to the altar, and one is cast out into oblivion, into the wilderness. So these are identical goats in every respect. How do we know which one is the good goat and which one is the bad goat?
We tie a ribbon around one of them, a red ribbon.
How do we decide which one to tie the ribbon to?
It's by lots.
It's by lots. It's totally arbitrary, right? There is no way to tell who is the good goat and who is the bad goat, except that we flip a coin and we then designate, okay, you will represent good and you will represent evil. Look exactly the same. And you will have a good destiny. You will be offered as a sacred sacrifice to the Almighty. And you will be condemned and thrown out into the no man's land. Right? You will be completely abandoned, but of course not quite abandoned, because then who is going to come and devour that poor forlorn goat? The forces of evil, because that's where evil lurks. Evil lurks in the wilderness, in the literally the places where civilization does not rule, where chaos rules. So then what happens? Satan jumps on this delicious goat, and we continue, while Satan's attention has been distracted, we continue getting atonement from God. So these are two places where we trick Satan, where we know Satan's true nature, and therefore we can be wily and shrewd and manipulative and take advantage of Satan to fool Satan and to get Satan out of the way. If we don't do it, what happens? Then we're all goners. If we don't do it, then we will be crushed by Satan. We will be corrupted by Satan, and all of our hope will be lost. So even though it's not the most noble, it's not the most beautiful ceremony that we do, it's a pagan, it smacks of paganism, and it's actually morally questionable. It's absolutely, as we say about Jacob, absolutely necessary.
Rabbi?
Yes.
So was Esav inherently evil at
Yes.
the time of his birth, even? At the time of his birth?
That's the way the Zohar puts it from the very beginning.
Right. Just wanted
That Esav's root is evil from the very start, and Jacob is the good from the very start. And we're going to continue to see how this gets reiterated and developed as the Zohar continues. But yeah, this goes against what we would be much more comfortable thinking about, that people choose evil, they're not inherently evil. But that's the challenge again with these kinds of biblical stories, that the Zohar constantly works on them on multiple levels. Sometimes these people are really people, with all of the complexities of people, with all of the pathos of what it means to be a person, with all of the possibilities of good and of evil and of failure and of redemption. And other times they become symbols, pure and simple, and they become exemplars of completely abstract values and entities. And that's what we have here at this point. It's a dance that the Zohar keeps on dancing, and it's a dance that it applies to real life. That in real life, we need to have a kind of a ritual approach that affirms the continuing antagonism between good and evil, and the necessity to defeat evil at any cost.
Rabbi?
Yes, who's that?
It's David Campbell.
David, yeah.
I am struck how in the Torah and in the Zohar, we're continually confronting questions of entitlement and justification. Last week's parsha, Korach was entitled. I can lead. In the Zohar, the moon was entitled. I can shine brightly. Jacob is justified in dealing tortuously. His mother Rebecca was no less a trickster, or his uncles. Pinchas is entitled to skewer, in this week's parsha, to skewer people. It's really it's an issue in real. Here I am talking in front of a few shrinks. We have shrinks in our midst, but this whole
otherwise we wouldn't be able to fit everybody on the screen.
But it's a constant theme. how are we supposed to think about this? Is it an intimidating thing to, or is it, or is there some light, some fixture on the coast toward which we sail, and hopefully we eventually arrive, some guiding principle?
Rabbi,
Well,
could I interrupt for a second?
Rich, yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to follow up that it's maybe a little different than what David's saying, but to me it seems like Esav's fate is just like that of the scapegoat. It's neither of them, have any control over their fate. So there's no entitlement in some sense to me.
Right.
It's
So
out of control.
okay. So that's a good question. Is evil? I'm not dealing with the big question that David was asking, but in a certain sense, is evil responsible for being evil if evil was created as evil? What's it evil's fault? What is it Esav's fault? If Esav has no choice, then what's the how can we blame Esav for being evil? That's who he is. That's he was created that way.
Well, you could blame him for individual acts.
Well, how could you even blame him for individual acts if he's evil by nature? Then
he performs.
Then it would be a miracle if he ever did anything decent.
Well, it seems like you could have free will in how you go about your free inclined nature. I don't know if that makes sense.
So that's what I was trying to say before about the duality here between the people as people and then the people as symbols. Each person as a person has this complexity and can make choices as best as we can make choices. Sometimes we paint ourselves into a corner and then we end up losing the wiggle room to make the choices that we originally are given. But theoretically, each and every one of us can make very meaningful choices. And that sense of entitlement that David was saying before is part of what we need to choose to get out of, right? We can choose to look at ourselves and look at the world either this way or that way. We can either incorporate more people into our embrace, love your neighbor as yourself, or we can choose to say, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? So how much are we going to, look one way or the other? The idea is that we have, as human beings, we have choice. What the Zohar is trying to dramatize is that the choice is between really meaningfully different choices. Good and evil are not relative. Good is good and evil is evil. So then what it happens to do is it makes this kind of a Punch and Judy show, or this kind of like very simplistic. Look at like old silent movies. When the black-hatted villain walks in, and the music, right, and the villain twists his mustache in a very serpent-like manner, right? This is the representation of evil. Now, what happened? Why did that evil person that came into the thing to try to now capture the innocent damsel? Why did he become evil? What happened when he was a kid? How did his parents treat him? That's irrelevant to the story. That's a different story altogether. This is when we get to this kind of like black and white kind of story, we're in a mythic realm, which is meant to highlight what's at stake in our difficult choices that we make in the real world. So Esav in the Bible is a complicated figure. Esav does not necessarily come off as such a terrible guy in the Torah itself. If you just read the Torah as a melodrama, Esav is just, a guy, who's has got some bad luck here. Then whatever happens to him later, happens to him later. But that's not what the Zohar and Jewish tradition in the end is interested in. They're interested in using this story as a model for us to think about what our choices are, and that that evil is threatening, and evil is very real. And when we just talk about choice, we often fall into a kind of a relativistic perspective, where you could choose this. That's not what I would choose, but somebody else, could choose what they choose. Who knows? I'm not in their place. The sages say, don't judge somebody else when you're not in their place. So how can I judge it? So good. So I won't judge them, maybe. But when I'm confronted with a choice, I have to judge myself, and I have to judge the choice. I have to judge, is this right or wrong? Am I going to choose the right thing, or am I not going to choose the right thing? As a society today, we can't simply raise up, our hands and go, well, everybody is, thank God we have a free country. Everybody can choose whatever they want. So people that choose to discriminate can choose to discriminate, and people that choose to kill people for no reason can choose to kill for no reason. It's a choice. I wouldn't do that, but they're free to choose whatever they want. That's for most of us, I think, an unacceptable perspective. That's not a kind of just an array of choices, and each person is just free to choose. There has to be a place where we draw a line. What the Zohar is doing is, wherever that line is, whatever falls on the other side of the line, that really is evil. And evil is real. And here we're calling evil Esav. What we're also saying, though, is, because it's real, it's a creation of God. It comes out of God because God is the source of all reality. Right? Yotzer or uvorei choshech, says shalom uvorei et hakol. That's the first blessing that we say in the beginning of real Shachrit. God creates light and darkness, makes peace and harmony, but also creates everything else. Hakol, everything. And that's a softening of what it says in the Navi, where it says Yotzer or uvorei choshech, says shalom uvorei ra. That God creates evil. So the Zohar doesn't flinch here. It struggles. It doesn't necessarily celebrate it always. It feels the discomfort of what that means. But it now tries to say, okay, and now we have to recognize it and then do something about it. And when we do something about it, we're going to get our hands dirty sometimes.
We learn in Bereshit that we all have Yetzer Hara, so there's no question that these are the question of entitlement and justification is something we are destined to be struggling with continually.
Right? For sure. Until one day there's this hope that God will release us from that struggle by defeating that bad Leviathan. That's what Isaiah's discussion is, and then defeating death, and then we will come to a place where all we will know is Yom Shekulo Tov, a day that is all goodness. That's what Shabbat is supposed to be a taste of, right? Shabbat is a momentary glimpse of that restored perfection before it all got messed up. Yeah. Okay.
Therefore, Jacob, mystery of faith, constantly acted towards Esav so as to prevent that serpent from defiling the sanctuary or even approaching it. Neither Abraham nor Isaac had to conduct himself tortuously, since Esav, aspect of that serpent, had not yet arrived in the world. But Jacob, master of the house, had to confront the serpent, totally denying him the power to defile Jacob's temple. So Jacob had to act so more than anyone else in the world.
Jacob had to act so, in other words, so in that way,
more than anyone else in the world. Consequently, Holy Israel was selected as the share of the Blessed Holy One. As is written, for Yud-He Vav-He's share is his people, Jacob his allotted inheritance.
Okay. So now we get some unexpected imagery, and the way that the Zohar presents this is a little bit difficult given what we were just saying, right? First of all, Jacob is characterized by a phrase, Raza de Behemnuta, mystery of faith. What is that all about? How is that being applied to Jacob here? Therefore, Jacob, mystery of faith, constantly acted toward Esav, etc. So, in what sense does that characterization apply to Jacob, and why is it necessary here? So, the mystery of faith, or the secret of faith, is for the Zohar the ability to apprehend all of the multiplicity that seems to apply to the world and to God as one. That's for the Zohar. Faith, it doesn't mean to believe in God. I believe in God, I don't believe in God, I'm agnostic. That's not what faith is. Emunah, for the Zohar, is to see all of the differences that are out there as completely connected and participating in oneness. And that's the mystery. That's the difficulty. That's a secret. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can do it all the time. So Jacob is the mystery of oneness because Jacob is the harmonious unification of right and left. When we say right and left, we're already being dualists. We already recognize that if it's on the right, it's not on the left. If it's on the left, it's not on the right. But the secret of faith is to understand that there's some oneness that encompasses the right and the left both together. And that is Jacob's identity. Jacob is the perfect synthesis, bringing the opposites into union, into harmony. So Jacob has to recognize the differences and yet somehow incorporate them into the oneness. He's fighting against Esav all the time so as to prevent the serpent from defiling the sanctuary or even approaching it. So what does that mean? What sanctuary? There is no sanctuary when Jacob is alive, right? We're mixing biblical entities from different periods and putting them all together. Jacob doesn't live any time when there is a sanctuary, right? The sanctuary, if you look in the note, the sanctuary is Shekhinah, right? So Jacob is attached to Shekhinah, and this, of course, is the image that we have of the male lover that Jacob actually instantiates as the central force in God's male body, male half, and Jacob joins with Shekhinah the way God's male half joins with God's beloved, with the female half. So that union, which is again mystery of faith, bringing the two halves together, that's what's at stake. And what Esav is interested in doing is divide and conquer. What Esav is interested in doing is to create the perception and the apperception of distinction, of otherness, of no union, of no connection. And how will Esav do that? By capturing the sanctuary and by polluting and destroying the sanctuary. So this is Jacob's ongoing fight to protect the possibility of union. Neither Abraham nor Isaac had to conduct themselves tortuously since Esav wasn't yet in the world. What do we make of that? How do we deal with that when, I've been talking about how Esav is of essence the evil. And certainly evil has existed in the world since the beginning of time. So what does that mean? There was no evil until Esav came on the scene? How could this possibly be right? What must be the message here? It cannot, like I said, and we said it earlier. The story of good and evil, what, Cain and Abel, is not a story about evil. So evil has been out there all the time. God destroys the entire world in the time of Noah because of how evil it is. So don't tell me that Esav didn't exist yet. If Esav is essentially evil, then essential evil has been out there since creation. So how do we make sense of this? You make sense by being silent, right? And that's true. This is not an easy question. This is a question to struggle with, and it's not like I have the answer, in my back pocket here. I think it's a very serious kind of question. I would suggest that Esav hadn't arrived at the scene yet because Jacob hadn't arrived at the scene yet. That's what we're now actually talking about. Yes, there is an abstract black and whiteness that we can talk about conceptually. But then we also have to talk about human history and how the black and the white play out in the world. Esav was a unique challenge to Yaakov. Abraham never had that kind of unique challenge. Yitzchak never had that unique challenge. Even though each of them had to contend with evil and had to have their own spiritual journey to fulfill and their destiny to reach, Egypt, of course, is again identified early on as that place of evil, that place of magic and superstition, and all that slimy, slippery stuff. And Abraham has to contend with it, and Isaac has to contend with it. But there's a difference between the way they have to contend with it and the way Jacob has to contend with it. What's the difference? Abraham doesn't have a twin brother. Isaac does not have a twin brother. Yaakov has a twin brother. For Abraham, the otherness is out there. And perhaps it's clearer to see. I mean, his spiritual courage to extricate himself from a world that was completely, looking at reality differently from him is extraordinary. We talked about it for pages and pages and pages and pages. But he is able to separate himself out from the world without any inherent contradiction within him. The closest he comes to a problem like this is with his nephew Lot, right? Where we have a drama there of choosing, going back to what we were talking about before. Abraham sees that Lot and he can't get along, and he says to Lot, make your choice. Whatever choice you make, you go to the right, I'll go to the left. You go to the left, I'll go to the right. and Lot chooses what he does. He chooses Sodom and Amorah. In the end, Lot is not Sodom and Amorah. Lot is not the essential evil of Sodom and Amorah. When we have Isaac, Isaac has to contend with a brother, but not a twin brother, right? And he himself is not the one who has to fight with Ishmael, although Ishmael gangs up on him, supposedly. One way to read the story. Ishmael is then thrown away. Ishmael is sent out. In fact, some people read the story, we've talked about this other times on the high holidays, that's what the scapegoat story is. The two goats there are Isaac and Ishmael, not Yaakov and Esau, but Yitzchak and Ishmael. One who gets sent away, and one who gets put on the altar. So, nevertheless, even though the struggle is always there from the beginning of time, the nature of the struggle changes with Yaakov. And Yaakov is, of course, in Zohar's viewpoint, a further development in the unfolding of God in the world. Yaakov is the mystery of the faith. Yitzchak is not the mystery of the faith. Abraham is not the mystery of the faith. Yitzchak is left. Abraham is right. Yaakov comes on the scene when we're ready for the next stage, which is to combine left and right. And that's why Yaakov has a fight on his hands that no one ever had before. Because Esau is precisely here at this moment when Yaakov's job is to bring everything together to be able to create Mika Amcha Yisrael Goy Echad Baaretz. Who is like your people, Israel, the children of Jacob, one people in the land, the custodians of the mystery of the faith. So Esau hadn't arrived in the world yet, because Jacob hadn't arrived in the world yet. And that's part of the twinning. That's part of the mirror imaging. Once you have a Yaakov, that's when you get an Esau. So Yaakov's job theoretically should be to just be this harmonious entity, this harmonious person who joins the right and the left. Instead, he has to fight. He has to fight for his very life, because Esau will undermine everything that Jacob would like to do. Jacob, master of the house. Right? So what does that mean? So if you look down below 105, note 105, Beryl, back to you.
Jacob, master of the house. Jacob, symbolizing Tiferet, is the husband of Shekhinah, known as house. In the Zohar, the phrase master of the house is applied to both Jacob and Moses, as well as to the mystic who masters the secrets of Torah.
Right. So here we have now that Jacob is he's the one who's in charge now. He's responsible for the well-being of the house. The house for him eventually will be who? Rachel. Right? So Rachel, again, that's the love of his life. Rachel will be another Shekhinah figure, just like his mother, Rivka, is a Shekhinah figure. Right? Just like Sarah is a Shekhinah figure. So Jacob is going to need to unite and take care of Shekhinah, and Esau will try to make that impossible. And that's, of course, part of what the struggle for the bracha is. So we also know, as we're going to get to in a second, that from the very early youth of Jacob and Esau, they're differentiated about their place. What is Esau's place? What's his territory?
The fields. He's a hunter.
Correct. And what is Jacob's territory?
The tent.
The tent. So master of the house already actually comes out of the very simple biblical identification of each one. Esav is the outlaw, the wild man, the one who has no boundaries, who has no identifiable place. Yaakov is content to be within the confines of the tent. He's a master of the house. The house is a good place for him. He doesn't want to get out of that house. So this is Jacob's challenge, to protect the integrity of the temple. The temple, and each person's home is their temple, to coin a phrase. Right? So Jacob had to act more than anyone else in the world. Consequently, holy Israel, and it's pretty shocking, there's actually a typo in our book, at least in my book. I have a V after the word holy. Notice that? So, coincidence? I think so. Holy Israel was selected as the share of the Blessed Holy One. Okay, so what's this consequently all about? What is this a consequence? How does this follow? Consequently, etc., etc.
Do you want me to read 106?
No. Okay, read 106. What the heck? Maybe it'll help us.
Consequently, holy Israel was selected, since Jacob outwitted Esav and received Isaac's blessing.
Okay. But what does that tell us still about what the phrases here mean? Right? Ki Yaakov bachar lo ka Yisrael iskulato. This is the verse that this verse is Ki chelek Hashem amo Yaakov chevel nachlato. I'm sorry. So the choosing of Jacob and the choosing of Israel, the choosing of the people, is done by God, but it's only done by God because Jacob makes it possible. Right? What if Jacob had not defeated Esav? What if Jacob had not outsmarted Esav at that moment of blessing? Then what would have happened? Then God would have been lost. Right? And God would not have been able to have God's own inherited portion. When we think about the fight between Jacob and Esav, it's a fight over inheritance, isn't it? It's a fight over who's going to now be the heir of dad and mom, right? So Esav is the firstborn. He thinks he's going to get everything. And then everything that happens, he sells the birthright, whatever. And Jacob fools his father and gets the blessing. And with that, he gets the inheritance. And now we see that by Jacob getting the inheritance, he's really playing out the drama of whether God will get God's inheritance. When who's supposed to be getting an inheritance, right? The Blessed Holy One is now the share that is Holy Israel selected as the share of the Blessed Holy One. The Blessed Holy One gets the inheritance. Who is the Blessed Holy One? Is Yaakov. The Blessed Holy One is the same words, is the same phrase as that divine part of God which Jacob is identified with. So the struggle of Jacob to get his inheritance is the struggle of the Holy Blessed One to get his inheritance. And that's a simultaneous drama in the divine realm, a fight within the divine realm, a struggle to keep evil at bay, so that the union between the Holy Blessed One and Israel is Shekhinah. So Israel, as Jacob, is the Holy Blessed One. But the assembly of Israel is Shekhinah. The union between the assembly of Israel and the Holy Blessed One is the union between Jacob as a symbolic, the word we had a few weeks ago, as an avatar of the divine, right? And as a human being, as the patriarch of a people, right? This is the circle that has to be constantly reaffirmed and strengthened, and can't be broken. Okay. Comments? All right, moving right along.
The
Okay,
boys,
we'll have a few more minutes, so we'll get into the next paragraph.
the boys grew up, Rabbi Elazar said. Each one diverged on his path, one to the side of faith, the other to the side of idolatry. So it had been in Rebekah's womb, each one inclining to his side. For when she engaged in good deeds or passed by an auspicious site for performing a mitzvah, Jacob would joyously thrust to come out. And when she went by an idolatrous site, that wicked one would kick to come out, as they have established. Consequently, when they were created and emerged into the world, each one diverged, drawn to his appropriate place. So the boys grew up. Esav became a skilled hunter,
etc., etc., etc. So the verse is in note 107. Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a mild man dwelling in tents. What we talked about a minute ago. So what we have here is Rabbi Elazar saying that they grew up and they became clearer and clearer in their differentiation, but actually their distinction started already in the womb. And if we look at note 109, we have the basis for what Rabbi Elazar describes as what happened when Rivka was carrying them in her womb, and them struggling, to go this way or that way, and splitting up from each other. But let's look at 109. Breshit Rabbah.
So it had been in Rebekah's womb. When she passed by idolatrous temples, Esav kicked convulsively to come out. When she passed by synagogues or academies, Jacob kicked convulsively to come out.
So that's the original Midrash. Now let's look at what the Zohar does with the Midrash. How does the Zohar rephrase that Midrash? For when she engaged, you got that? You can start from, that's the third line, the end of the line. Please, You can read it again. Beryl.
Yeah. I'm looking for the place you want me.
It's in that second half of the page. The boys grew up, the third line in that paragraph, at the end of the line. For when.
So wait, am I in the note or am I in the regular?
Now we did the note, and now let's go back to the Zohar text.
For when she engaged in good deeds or passed by an auspicious site for performing a mitzvah, Jacob would joyously thrust to come out. And when she went by an idolatrous site, that wicked one would kick to come out, as they have established.
So there's a slight different kind of way of putting it. We don't have to make a very big deal about it, but it's still nice to notice. What's the difference between the Midrash and the Zohar?
Well, Midrash names them by name, Jacob and Esau, but in the Zohar, it specifically identifies Esau as the evil one.
Okay, but okay, that's true. But we know that we're talking about Jacob and Esau. What are the places that are mentioned in the Midrash? What are the places mentioned in the Zohar? Let's start with the Midrash.
Idolatrous temples
Versus
and academies.
Right. So what we have as a dichotomy is between identifiable institutions. Idolatrous temples versus Jewish temples, Jewish shuls and yeshivas, right? So she walked by this building and one baby would start wanting to come out. She walked by the other building, the other baby would come out. So each building represented something. Each building represents the value of either idolatry or service to God. How does the Zohar put it?
Good
She
deeds.
engages in good deeds or passes by a place that is an auspicious site for performing mitzvahs. It's a little different. A little different. The idolatrous place is mentioned, right? Then when it comes to the evil one, when she went by an idolatrous site, that wicked one kicked. But when we talk about the good side, the opposite of the idolatrous site, the Zohar could have so easily just simply said a shul or a yeshiva. They could have said a synagogue or an academy. They don't say that. They say Rebecca engaged in good deeds. It's not about some institution that, of course, Rebecca has very little entry into. Right? The synagogues and the academies were not exactly women's spaces. But here, Rebecca is given the credit of doing her own mitzvot, and then any auspicious place, any place that could be a place where a mitzvah could be done. What we have here in a very tiny little minuscule way is the Zohar's, again, taking Torah and mitzvahs out of the study hall, out of the building, out of the enclosed space. She's out there. She's on the road. She encounters places where she can do a mitzvah. She's doing good things. And that is what gives delight to her good son and not to the other son. So it's a tiny little nuance, not the biggest deal in the world, but something that was, I think, intentionally chosen. This is the way the Zohar is thinking. It didn't want to say synagogue and academy. It says it other places. It's not like hard and fast rule here. But nevertheless, the joy that the Zohar puts out here is to imagine Rebecca as her own agent of doing mitzvot. Very nice. Okay, we'll continue here, God willing, next time. Sei gesinnt und stark.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeshkoach. Good night.
Right.
Laila Tov, Yasher Koach.
Laila tov.